Hi, and welcome to Mr. Bench's Book Reviews. What's in the box today? Let's see, we've got... yes. We've got... Let's see... Let's go with... Not sure what to choose, so much great stuff in the box. Let's have... Sorry, I should have prepared my box. Let's have this one. It's Mr. Daydream by Roger Hargreaves. I may start preparing in advance. I'm going to select from the box. Let's see. Let's get into it. Mr. Daydream, just he's blue. Looks a bit like a cloud. It's a nice cover. And he's number 13 in the Mr. Men series. He's over here somewhere. There he is. Let's see, Mr. Daydream. This is a story about Mr. Daydream, unusually for a Mr. Men book. That's not Mr. Daydream on the first page. As you see, different bloke. You know what he looks like, don't you? Because you've seen his picture on the front of this book. Oh, that's nice. Breaking the fourth wall. It's also a story about a little boy called Jack. And you don't know what he looks like, so here's a picture of him. Well, that's great. I like that start. 10 out of 10. Now, Jack was a very good little boy. He always ate up all his lunch. He always went to bed when he was told. He always said please and thank you. But Jack was a daydreamer. Whenever he was supposed to be thinking, typo, about something, he found himself thinking about something else. Daydreaming. It's Jack in his pyjamas. That's nice though. One day, Jack was at school. There he is, mouthless. He was sitting at his desk, listening to the teacher talk about history. Well, that's what a good boy would be doing. It was a very warm day, and Jack was glad he was sitting at the back of the classroom next to the open window. It's all right. Well done, Jack. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Jack saw something outside the window on the grass in front of the school. Something blue. It was a small, cloud-shaped figure. Jack couldn't believe his eyes. The figure looked at Jack, looking at him, smiled, and waved. There it is. I think you know who that is, don't you? As an observant reader, I think that's Mr. Daydream. But yeah, blue, cloud-shaped. I like it when the text matches the pictures. And he's blue and cloud-shaped, so that's good. Jack looked at his teacher, who was still talking. Then he got up quietly, ever so quietly, and slipped out of the open window. That's nice. That's a reference to the open window introduced earlier in the piece. So we didn't have to open the window, which could have caused a disturbance. There might be something that Hargreaves caught in the edit. He might have originally had the window closed, but decided to emphasise how open it was, so they could have things happening quietly. Then he, that's Jack, crossed the grass to the strange-looking cloud-shaped figure. "Hello," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm Mr. Daydream," said the figure. Well, that's what we suspected. "What's your name?" "Jack," said Jack. So Jack's also telling the truth. He's supposed to be a good boy. That's good. He's not deceiving Mr. Daydream. And I think we can assume that Mr. Daydream is also being honest. "I'm going off on an adventure," said Mr. Daydream to Jack. "Would you like to come with me?" "Oh, yes, please," replied Jack. "Very well, then," said Mr. Daydream, and, putting 2 fingers in his mouth, he let out the loudest whistle Jack had ever heard in his whole life. We don't know about Jack's history of whistling, or the whistles he's heard, but we can assume it's fairly loud. There's Daydream whistling, and there's a note, or what's that, a couple of quavers. Not the crisps, quavers. Then, it doesn't say then, but a huge bird swooped down out of the sky and landed beside Jack and Mr. Daydream. Now, we were told that Daydream was small. He seems to be slightly smaller than Jack, and the huge bird is a lot bigger than them, so that adds up nicely. They haven't really drawn the grass there anymore, but that's okay. Just focus on the size of the different. It's a bit like one of those diagrams you get that show the size of a brontosaurus next to the size of a human and a cloud-shaped Mr. Man. Come on, said Mr. Daydream to Jack, and climbed onto the bird's back. Jack climbed on too. It was a really enormous bird, and there was plenty of room for both of them. Hold on, said Mr. Daydream. Jack held on tight. He's being very obedient. The huge bird flapped its huge wings. Makes sense, huge bird with huge wings. And suddenly they were high up in the air. And how sudden that is. I mean, if it's flapping the wings, it's an expectation of upward movement. But anyway, they flew, like, it's not as sudden as we had something happen suddenly earlier. And Daydream just appears out in front of the school, but this is more consequentially. Is that the word? As a result. They were higher up in the air. Anyway, they flew faster and faster over the countryside. They flew over fields and farms. You'd get them in the countryside. And towns, you kind of have country towns, I suppose. And hills and trees and valleys until they were far, far away from Jack's school. Well, yeah, if they're flying faster and faster, they're going to get far, far away. That's nice. Too fast is too fars. That makes sense. And it was very exciting. That's written from Jack's point of view, I suppose. Although Mr. Daydream did describe it as an adventure as well, so maybe he doesn't do this sort of thing very often either. Hard to say. No, I don't know if the school is in the countryside or if it's an inner city school. So they have to first get out of the city. Hard to say. Anyway, Mr. Daydream turned to Jack. How would you like to go to Africa? He shouted. I mean, if you're flying quickly on top of a bird, probably quite a lot of noise from the wind. So shouting is probably a good idea. They were travelling so fast now, Jack just nodded his head. Don't quite get the connection, but maybe he doesn't think he can raise the volume needed to reply, and held on even tighter. I assume they start in the United Kingdom. I think these are British. So when they go to Africa, I guess they means flying south. Yeah, I think they're based in the United Kingdom. Jack, perfectly common name in Britain. And they flew across the sea. That's nice. We had the faster and faster, and then they were far, far away, and then they flew and they flew. It's nice. It shows emphasises the long distances, the fact that things aren't happening suddenly. It just takes a bit of time. Across the sea. Well, just depends where they started, but if they started in Britain, they would have to go across the English Channel. I mean, they could go via the Atlantic, I suppose. Suddenly, so now it is sudden. It seemed in no time at all. Now that is at slight odds with them flying, which suggests things ongoing and taking some time. But then suddenly it seemed in no time at all. There below them was Africa. But maybe that's just in relation to the expected time it would normally take to get to Africa from where they presumably started. Anyway, there was Africa below them. Not sure how Jack recognises Africa. The bird landed in a jungle clearing, and Jack and Mr. Daydream climbed off the bird's back. It was very hot. Now, I would expect the jungles of Africa to not be the bits closest to Britain. I'm not great on African geography. But it may mean they're going down the Atlantic first and then taking like a left turn eastwards if they want to get to a jungle near the coast. so it feels sudden when they get there. Anyway, so they climbed off the bird's back, and it was very hot, which is a common thing people associate with Africa. You know, it's probably something of a generalisation, but jungle's probably hot, fairly equatorial, most of them, are they? Expect so. Hotter than Britain, probably. Come on, said Mr. Daydream to Jack. That's his catchphrase, he said that twice now. Let's go and explore. So off they set, pushing their way through the jungle. Suddenly, that's sudden again, isn't it? It's a lot of changing. But again, I mean, they're pushing their way through the jungle. And so suddenly in the middle of the clearing, I mean, they landed in a clearing. So, I mean, if you're in a clearing, you don't have to push your way through the jungle. So I guess suddenly in the middle, it says the clearing, I guess they mean in another clearing. They saw an elephant. I guess you could suddenly reach another clearing after pushing your way. And then this introduction of an elephant would also be surprising, perhaps. Hello, Mr. Daydream, trumpeted the elephant down its trunk. Would you like a lift? Elephants when I talk is quite common in Mr. Men books, so don't be put off by that. Yes, please, replied Mr. Daydream, and the elephant reached out his trunk. They say its trunk in the previous one, now they say his trunk, so I guess to start with, they just think it's somewhat, make it a boy elephant. Picked him up and then put him on his back. Then he reached out his trunk again, picked up Jack and put him on his back. It was very high. Well, it would be. It's an elephant. There's Jack, he seems quite happy about being picked up by an elephant. The elephant carried them through the jungle until they came to a river. I don't have a problem with that. Then he set them down on the ground, said goodbye, and went off back into the jungle. Okay. How are we going to cross the river? Jack asked Mr. Daydream. I mean, it kind of suggests they know where they're going. If the elephant's offering them a ride or a lift, and now they kind of automatically assume they want to cross this river. That way you just walk along the river. But maybe see a river, cross it. Perhaps I can be of assistance, wheezed a particularly oily voice coming from the river. They looked, and there was a crocodile. Use my back as a bridge, suggested the crocodile. It was very helpful. As nice as the previous page finished with, it was very high, and then there was, it was very hot. And there was, it was very exciting. So a lot of these pages are ending with like an expression of an opinion about how things are. Which is nice. I mean, it's nice to know how Jack's feeling. He's commenting on what's going on. It's nice. Helps you empathise. So there's a very helpful, oily voiced crocodile. They were halfway across the river on the crocodile's back when the crocodile grinned a rather nasty grin. All teeth and no smile. Then, flicking his enormous tail and shooting Jack and Mr. Daydream up into the air, the crocodile opened his horribly large mouth and waited. Here's another one. It was very frightening. And there's a picture of the jaws of the crocodile. There's the thing about crocodiles, possibly alligators' jaws opening in a certain way, but I can't really tell from that picture. I mean, it looks to me like that is a jaw where the upper jaw is opening. But on the previous page, I guess that one is as well. So I guess maybe that's how it is with crocodiles. I can't remember if it's crocodiles or alligators where that happens. It's well known though, so if I had a better knowledge, I would know. And I expected it is, otherwise it seems very deliberately drawn that way. Oh dear, gasped Jack as he looked down at that enormous mouthful of teeth. Well, before they said it was horribly large, it's enormous, and it was the tail that was enormous. But maybe when you're plummeting into a mouth, it tends to look bigger. Oh dear, oh help. Mr. Daydream, upside down beside him, put 2 fingers in his mouth and let out that very large whistle of his. Large whistle is interesting. Use of adjectives. It was a loud whistle earlier. It was the loudest he'd ever heard. But anyway, suddenly, there we go again. Keep you on your toes, don't they, in this one? Just as the crocodile's mouth was about to go snap, sorry, capitals, the big bird, it was huge earlier, swooped down, it like swooping, it did that earlier, down out of the sky. So the big bird, not to be confused with Sesame Street's Big Bird, this is not capitalised, swooped down out of the sky. Mr. Daydream and Jack landed right on the bird's back. Oof, said Jack. Bother, said the crocodile. Crocodile was hungry. We don't get an it was relieving or anything, or not that one. Well, that's good then. Here we are. Well, I promised you an adventure, didn't I? Grinned Mr. Daydream. He did. That's nice. I mean, there's quite nice text consistency here. Use of repetitions and consistent vocab at times, except when referring to the sizes of things. I guess the assumption is that I would make that huge, large, possibly even loud and enormous are just being used interchangeably, and they're not supposed to necessarily define different sizes on a scale. You certainly did, said Jack, because he was listening earlier, like we were. And now, said Mr. Daydream, I think we will go to Australia. And they did. I mean, that's much more specific than just going to Africa, though with the jungle we obviously got some precision of location. Australia's quite big as well, of course. And they did. And Jack learned to throw a boomerang so that it always came back to him. Well, that's so to do with boomerangs. It doesn't say how they get to Australia. I don't know if... Well, I guess they're on the bird still. Yeah, okay, so that's just obvious. Doesn't say how long that took. Because Australia's even further. Well, I'm not an expert. It's possible that from the tip of Shetland down to the Cape of Africa, of Southern Africa, it's further than from South Africa to the Perth, but not Perth in Scotland, Perth in Australia. I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't say how long it took. Anyway, and now, said Mr. Daydream, I think we'll go to the North Pole, which is certainly a very long way from Australia. It's a different hemisphere. And right at the top of that hemisphere, Australia means southern, something or other. Aust means southern. And North Pole means north. And they did. And Mr. Daydream fell right up to his middle in a snowdrift. Oh dear. Some people will tell you there isn't actually any snow at the North Pole, but they're clearly wrong. Mr. Daydream found some. And now, said Mr. Daydream, I think we'll go to the Wild West. And they did. Well, that's interesting. Because that's the first time they've actually travelled through time and not just space. Because, I mean, it's fairly... without mentioning it previously, you kind of think that Jack is just in, like, modern times in some school. It was published in 1972. I'm pretty sure the Wild West didn't really exist in the 70s. And Mr. Daydream found a huge 10-gallon cowboy hat. It's huge. And Mr. Daydream, as we know, is small, so that's why it's too big for him. The trouble was, when he put it on, he couldn't see out. Jack, he called from underneath the hat. Jack! Jack! Suddenly, there we go again, Jack realised that it wasn't Mr. Daydream saying his name, it was his teacher. And Jack wasn't in the Wild West, he was sitting at his school desk. Jack, said the teacher again, you've been daydreaming. It was true. He had. So that whole adventure was just a daydream. which could explain all the suddenlies thing. I mean, I think it's quite a common phenomenon when dreaming that you don't always have transitions of place and time that are as gradual as you would expect them to be in real life. But do you know something? Talking to us again, like they did on the first page. That's nice. When you start the book with here you probably know blah blah blah, and now it's asking, do you know something? So they're addressing the reader again. Daydreaming is more fun than history. Well, it's an interesting thing to say at the end, but it's nice for the author to have an opinion. I like that. I think it had a lot of nice consistencies of language use and referencing things from earlier. I like the repetition of that it was exciting, it was hot. A couple of things, obviously. I don't really like the use of Africa to refer to a specific location. I think it'd be nice if people actually mentioned the country. We're going to say Australia, and Wild West is America. I mean, the United States of America. Although you would possibly be able to call me out on the fact that maybe they hadn't joined the United States when they were wild. But I think it's still a much more specific place than just saying Africa. And if he knows there's a jungle there, it wouldn't be that difficult to look up an African country with a jungle and elephants in it. And obviously, if Daydream was being more logistically efficient, you could just go to the South Pole from Australia. It's probably closer than the North Pole, but I guess if you just suddenly going to places, go where you like. So yeah, that was Mr. Daydream, a great Mr. Man book. If you'd like more Mr. Man books, do say it in the comments. And otherwise, take care. I will see you next time. Bye.